Welcome back. Namibia has witnessed a concerning rise in child abuse incidents which highlight how vulnerable children are to neglect, rape and violence. According to recent police reports, there were 5 reported cases in January 2024, followed by 3 in February and 1 in March. Namibian law prioritizes the protection of children, acknowledging their vulnerability and the necessity for safeguarding measures. Joining us today to discuss this matter is Yolande Engelbrecht, the head and coordinator of the Gender Division at the Legal Assistance Center. Yolande, good evening and thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening, Nina. Thanks for having me also.
Yolande, to start with, please provide an overview for us on the current trends in child abuse that you've observed. This should include any concerning patterns or shifts that have occurred in recent years.
Yeah, unfortunately, I want to refer to it not just as current trends, because we all know that this has been happening in the past, and it doesn't look like it's going to end also in future. So this is quite worrisome in terms of the Legal Assistance Center. It is really, really sad to see that the country is not really getting to the point that we are all hoping to get. There's a lot of factors that are obviously contributing. You know, children issues should be one of the priorities in any country. And hearing about all these statistics is obviously not very, very positive for the country.
Yolande, from a psychological perspective, what would you say are some of the common underlying factors or triggers that contribute to instances of child abuse? And how do these factors manifest in the behavior of perpetrators?
Yeah, that's quite an important question. I think before I can answer that question, it's very important to note that one of the most common crimes or offenses in Namibia against children is unfortunately still sexual abuse and physical abuse. But obviously, there are many other abuses that are being offended against children. And there are endless factors that can contribute to child abuse, but none of it should actually be justified in any form. It is happening. We can list issues such as wrong child discipline. We can list issues like neglect, harmful beliefs or practices. There's also the issue of alcohol abuse, and ignorance of child protection in general is quite worrisome. So we also have a generally abusive environment in families, in communities, in schools, and so on. And these are unfortunately situations where children are exposed the most.
What are some of the key psychological effects of child abuse on the victims, Yolande?
Well, I can safely say that the effects of any type of child abuse, it's unfortunately permanent. Imagine any child who is supposed to receive protection are raised in an unsafe environment. That will have permanent impacts on the child. And obviously the consequences of violence against children, including, the immediate personal impacts and the damage that they carry forward into later childhood is quite impactful. So these are not just short-term impacts or short-term effects, but it's definitely having a result in the early or later childhood development and so on. So it's really, really quite worrisome. We are very concerned. It's concerning that so many child abuse cases are being mentioned, and unfortunately we are not there yet, as I've shared.
Do these effects vary depending on the nature and severity of the abuse?
Yeah, of course. But as I've said earlier, abuse is abuse. Whether it's in some people's mind thinking that I'm just disciplining a child, or if there's rape involved, or if there's neglect involved, and so on. You know, our laws are quite vocal in terms of the type of abuses that a child should be protected about. So regardless of whether it's financial abuse, whether it's emotional abuse, intimidation, sexual abuse, rape, or child neglect, and so on. These are still, it still has a very severe impact on a child. Mm-hmm. For instance, if you take two examples, a child that has been raped and a child that has been neglected, I think the impact that situations like that is having is severe, regardless of what type of abuse it is.
Mm-hmm. Child abuse prevention and intervention efforts, Yolandi, often rely on early identification and intervention. What are the warning signs or indicators that parents, caregivers, and perhaps educators need to be aware of in order to identify potential cases of abuse?
Mm-hmm. Well, our Child Care and Protection Act is quite vocal and also very clear on the type of interventions and prevention measures. But the question obviously is, how do we prevent? How do we intervene if we don't have the resources, for instance, to do so? You know, I think a lot of children or our children suffer in silence, too scared to speak up, too scared to say something because maybe they have lost hope in the system. They have lost hope in the environment that they are staying in. So for me, the prevention and intervention efforts, I think in Namibia is definitely lacking. You know, we have provisions in the Child Care and Protection Act that speaks about people, or especially professionals, certain professionals must report just mere suspicion of child abuse or child neglect. You know, there's a whole list of professionals like teachers, principals, doctors, nurses, a whole list. But the question is, do we really report the mere suspicion that there is any type of child abuse? Say, for instance, a child sitting in the class, you can see that this child has changed. There's issues probably at home and so on. So intervention and prevention, or prevention and intervention, is very good terms, but it's already catered for in the law. It's just, do we really follow this type of interventions or prevention measures?
Given the complex interplay of psychological, social, and environmental factors that are involved in child abuse, Yolandi, what role do you believe community-based support systems and counseling services play, not only in addressing but also mitigating the impact of abuse on both victim and perpetrator?
Yeah, look, our focus is mainly basically on victims, especially child victims. Firstly, we need to understand that we have a huge shortage of all types of services. Not just community-based support systems, not just counseling services, but I think the two are probably one of the most important besides the legislation we have in the country. So I think definitely there's a huge need for it. Community-based support, what do we mean by that? Counseling services, what do we mean by that? I think we are very good at putting out words and terms and so on in Namibia, but we need to clarify, we need to define. What do we mean by a counseling service? Is the counseling services in the communities not accessible, or what do we mean by these terms? Like I said, we do have a law that speaks about all these things, but I think we should just work harder. We need all types of services when it comes to child abuse. And these are some of the issues that should be a priority in Namibia, not just for the person whose child is being abused, but everyone that are affected, as professionals or even as family members, as parents, as leaders, and so on. So I think we have a shortage, definitely. And community-based support systems, it's wonderful, in counseling services, because at least it gives the type of support that the child needs immediately after the abuse has taken place.
Yolandi Engelbrecht, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for joining us here on the show.
Thank you so much, Nina, for having me.
When we come back after this brief break.